You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how are you doing?
You know what? I would be doing a lot better if the Broncos hadn't looked like they did against the Raiders, but you know what? It's a sunny day, got my health, got a lot of good things going in life, so it's just football. Obviously, it's a big part of your life and my life as well, and people listening to this podcast obviously die hard, so we live and breathe it. But, you know, it's one game, week one, so gonna write it as what it is, you know? Can't make it too big of a thing.
Right. I'm with you. I went out and let up my anger on some weights today. That was kind of a nice feeling of just going and that was the hardest I've pushed in a while in the gym, so that was at least nice. But beyond that, you're right. You got to remind yourself it is a game, and it's for our enjoyment, and can't let it get us down too much. I mean, it is 1 week, and so Broncos have another game coming up. It's just kind of the way it goes. Thankfully, you can forget about it as quick as a few days. But it is sad to see that they lost that first game for sure.
And like we talked about last week, going over the schedule, you know, that was one of the few winnable games on this season's gauntlet of what they have coming up on the schedule. So, you know, we said last week, is it a must-win game? Pretty much, but this week 2 game, it absolutely is now a must-win game.
Right.
Like, they cannot finish the season, they cannot start the first quarter of the season going anything worse than 2-2, because it gets so hard after that. And you have something, I mean, things are going to change. See the Jags, Nick Foles getting hurt, the Browns looking like the Browns of old. You know, teams aren't going to be who we thought they were preseason. But man, that's still not a great Raiders team. And the Broncos, I mean, despite it being a 1-score game, they got their butts handed to them. They out-energied out. You know, you look at the stats, doesn't look like it was a shellacking, but Broncos were beat soundly in every phase of the game this past week, and it was disheartening.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that more as we go throughout this episode. So we'll save it here for a little bit, but just make sure that you're following us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, and of course Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated, and know that this podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
Fantasy football season is here, and this season there are more ways to win than ever before, because FanDuel has more ways to win cash prizes and once-in-a-lifetime experiences during every single game, every single week. Never played FanDuel fantasy football before? Great, because new users get $20 in site credit if they deposit $20. And even though the Denver Broncos might be off to a poor start this season, there's plenty of reason to be still excited about football because, of course, you can win some money playing fantasy football. Obviously, this week, the Broncos are going to be going up the Chicago Bears, so, hey, maybe you can pick both defenses. Who the heck knows? It's not going to be a high-scoring game, but either way, you can win even if the Broncos lose. Sign up for FanDuel now and get $20 in total bonuses. Just make sure you make your first deposit of $20 to get started, and you'll get an extra $5 in site credit every week for 4 weeks. Go to FanDuel.com/DFS Fantasy or download the FanDuel app today.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, so we thought we'd just start off with just kind of our general thoughts and breaking down the game and just what we saw from the Broncos, what we wish we would have seen, those kind of things. And so I'll just kick it off to you, Nick. Let's start with the offense, because, I mean, some of it you can blame on the offense in the game. Some of it you can not really blame on the offense, because at least in that first half, they weren't hardly even given a chance to be on the field. And the second half, they actually came out, put up some points, should have put up a lot more points, actually. I mean, you got the drop touchdown. You had the misread by Phillip Lindsay where it should have been a touchdown. He just cut back inside when he should have cut outside, which is kind of crazy for a guy of his size to be looking to cut inside. But it's just those little things are the difference between winning and losing. So I guess when you watch this offense, first half, what went wrong in the first half?
So much went wrong in the first half, but I guess for me, it really comes down to the Broncos were not themselves or being who they need to be identity-wise and doing that in an effective way. And that really comes down to, as much as I harp on it not being the way that the league is structured these days, this team is built that if they're going to be successful, they have to run the ball effectively. And when you run like they did in the first half, I know they started picking up chunk plays in the second half. They definitely ran the ball much better in the second half, although the Raiders went to a much more conservative defense. So, that's part of it. They didn't think the Broncos could catch up, and hey, what do you know, they didn't. But running for what they did in the first half, and not only the yardage, but the ineffectiveness per carry, you're going to put yourself constantly behind the 8 ball. And you have a defense that's just totally out of breath, tired, and low energy, and you're going to see what happens there. So really, for me, Flacco was about as good as I expected him to be. I mean, expecting him to be any better than that is being unreal with who he is. I mean, we know who he is at this point. He's a starting caliber quarterback. He's not a franchise quarterback, but he's not this spot starter quarterback either. That is the Case Keenums of the world, even lower. And then a tier under that is Trevor Siemian. But he's not good enough to put the game on his shoulders and carry the team. Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks talk about on the Move the Sticks podcast a lot. Is a guy the truck, or is he the hitch, the carrier, whatever is in the back there? You know what I'm talking about? Words escaping me right now. The guy that, is he being pulled along by the system, or is he the system? And Flacco needs good infrastructure around him. He needs a good run game. He needs a defense so they can play complementary football. And the Broncos did anything but that on offense in the first half. So it was ugly. We saw some Cortland Sutton sightings. Not getting Emmanuel Sanders involved is pretty conservative. The pass plays, everything, but really simple to me. They didn't run the ball effectively, and it's everything matriculated poorly from that.
For sure. You're right. I mean, the offensive line struggled to get much push in the run game there in the first half. Second half, they started getting a little bit more push and opening up some holes, looked much better. They struggled to pass protect. I mean, drops. There's just everything that could go wrong with the offense. And really the play calling in the first half, I was not a big fan of it either. There was just some plays that you're just kind of going, this looks like preseason still. And it did seem like they were in that preseason mode in the first half. And that's kind of what I wanted to get to on the defensive side then. Is they played very, very conservative on defense. They didn't really take any chances. They just kind of sat back and let the Raiders kind of pick them apart. I mean, it was just kind of like last year in the first time playing the Raiders, except this time the Raiders had a run game. And so they couldn't get him into some of those longer situations that they wanted to. And Derek Carr just said, okay, you're going to give me the quick pass? Thanks. That's easy. And so how much do you put on the players not doing their job, and how much do you put on Fangio for that defensive performance?
It's both. I mean, I know a lot of people want a hot take society, but you got to have a nuanced enough viewpoint to have it be both of them, right? Like the long preseason, they came out there and it felt like they were sleepwalking. The Raiders came out, a lot of energy. They seemed hyped to be there. And it's not like Denver came out there and expected to win. I just didn't feel any swag or intensity. It's like, guys, you need this win. This is a team that's won 11 games the last 2 seasons. You have so much to prove, and I just did not see the fight or the heart out there from the offense or the defense. Where's the intensity? So that was a big thing. So it goes on both, and I think the 1 game sample size, it's kind of hard to point at the general overall institutional issues, whether it is a players or coaches issues at this point. We should know more come 8 weeks into the season where we can start to get that. But what we have right now is what's on tape. And plenty of players didn't play great games, and the calls weren't great. So there's more than enough blame to go around for pretty much everybody involved.
Right. No, I agree. And we'll get into that a little bit more in our stock up, stock down look at things. But just wanted to get your general thoughts on a little bit of maybe who's at fault, or at least things that you saw that just made you go, what in the world are they doing? Because it still did, like I said, it felt like it was still preseason.
Yeah, just sleepwalking.
They
were sleepwalking.
They were.
It was a late game. I don't get it.
And it just, even the play calls seemed like preseason. There just wasn't much mix up. There wasn't much to try to confuse confuse Carr or anything like that. It seemed like they were the ones that were confused. It seemed like they didn't quite know what was coming at them on a lot of plays. And I don't know. And really, I don't think the Raiders did anything special. It just, they took exactly what the defense gave them. And I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. But it's kind of, I kept waiting for the changes. I didn't really see many of the changes.
I feel like they're a little bit hamstrung by the roster as well. I mean, I know that a lot of people don't want to hear it, but this is not a championship roster. I mean, we went over the checklist, and when you already are getting dinged up with the injuries they've had, and you're playing your third-string corner out there who's obviously in over his head, and like, where are you going? Like, what options do you have to go to? It's pretty much sink or swim because of the state of the roster. So you'd like to see some, Fangio to be this magic, genie who can kind of just poop out some defensive scheme and make everybody look great. But at some point, the players got to go out there and make a play too. And it just is. Some guys stepped up. Obviously, it's not, again, totally one way or the other, but it wasn't good, And I think the most disheartening thing for me is the offense looked about as I'd expect. The Raiders came out, they played pretty good run defense, and the Broncos, outside of Sanders, don't really have explosive pass options. So the offensive line looked a little worse than I'd hoped, but again, it was within the means of expectation, the air bar of expectation, if you will. It's the lower end for some of the run game specifically, but still. But the defense, I mean, guys, this is you bring in Fangio because you're trying to strengthen a strength. You think that your chance to compete this season, get more stable on the offense, move the ball, control the ball, and play great defense, and have an elite run-around defense getting after the quarterback. And if you are constantly letting the opposing team in third and short because you can't get wins in the run game, you're giving up 3 to 4 yards a run, and you're giving up short pass plays and the guys are getting 3 to 4 runs, you can't let the strength of your team go. And that playing from behind as well. So it's just, there's a big issue all around there as far as the whole impact of the game. And then special teams as well. I mean, the Broncos starting to chip back, and then special teams does what they've done this preseason and gives up that big kickoff return that pretty much just iced the game away. So a lot of issues. It's week 1. Obviously, you don't want to be too overreaction, even though we're doing a daily podcast here. I mean, sorry guys, like that's kind of what we are signed up for here, to have reactions to these kind of things. But it's a gnawing feeling, right? It's just like, you've seen The Waterboy, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Correct? It's like, oh no, we suck again. Yes, it's right. Or Ace Ventura, or not Ace Ventura, but Jim Carrey, and I think it was The Cable Guy. He's like, oh boy, here we go. Like, it's just like, man, I've seen this before, and as much as things change, they stay the same. Obviously, week 1, new scheme on both sides of the ball, new quarterback. I mean, remember how bad the Broncos started off with Peyton Manning in that 2012 team? They were 2-3, and then they got in a roll. Like, things can change. They can turn this around, but I just don't know if I see the horses on the roster that I trust that can pull that around. There isn't a Peyton Manning all of a sudden going to click with a young Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker and Ryan Clady and second-year Von Miller. That's not the case here. So definitely, I'm definitely discouraged. He said, what was it that Fangio said? He was disappointed but not discouraged. I think that's what he said. Don't have the quote here, but I'm discouraged. This is a game they needed to come in and they show up, and again, 1 possession game. Okay, it might as well have been a 20-point game. That feels like how much the Raiders beat them on the field, and it was not only from physical standpoint, but it felt emotional as well. So I don't know. I'm really hoping they show up for that home game. Need to bring that more intensity against the Bears next week. We'll have that Scouts Eye preview coming, but this was not good, and that 7-win prediction that I had. Obviously, we did the 8 wins in our episode here. We did combine. I had 7 wins. I'm down to 6 now. This was one of the wins I had on the schedule for the Broncos, especially the AB drama, and they did not look good. So I'm down to 6 wins now on the season.
Yeah. I think that the hard part for me is it's not only that the Raiders showed up with intensity and were able to run on them like they were, but then on top of that, the Broncos did themselves no favors. I mean, they just killed themselves with stupid penalties, with drops. I mean,
untimely sacks.
Yeah, untimely sacks. I mean, there's just so many things that you're looking at. Those are easy points that should have been on the scoreboard that make that an actual very competitive game. I mean, as much as the Broncos stunk it up, they should have still really been in that game. And maybe that should be the one encouragement, that the team made a lot of mistakes and still were in it. But it's still, I mean, until they show it, it's going to be hard not to think that that's who they're going to be. Yeah, I mean, that's like you said, that's all we've got to go on. And right now, what we've got to go on is nothing to get excited about.
It's, there are things to be excited about, but, we really need to uncover the surface to do that, because the general takeaway from this game, it's not just that they lost, it's how they lost. I mean, again, the Raiders really felt like they took their foot off the gas. The Raiders were in control the entire time. And, the Broncos, credit to them, they did not give up. They came out in the second half and they fought hard. The run game all of a sudden started clicking and they played better. There were some big plays. I mean, got Emmanuel Sanders involved. Defense got a 3-and-out. But then, you have bad blocking and you have that drop by the likes of Deshaun Hamilton, and the defense just can't get that play. They needed that play, whether it be a sack or even just a run stuff, for Christ's sake. It's 1st and 10, they ran it. Oh, negative 1 yard, like 2nd and 11. Heck yeah. Nope, it's 2nd and 7, 2nd and 6. And the Raiders are constantly able just to march it down the field. Short pass, not getting those negative plays on the run game. And it was enough to completely neuter the Broncos' biggest advantage, which was those edge rushers, who a lot of people pointing to Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, they didn't do anything this game. That's a systemic issue. I think that's a systemic issue at heart, because the team did not put themselves in the situation to earn those pass rush reps where those guys can pin their ears back, whether that be, the classic example of Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis just pinning their ears back because the Colts are up by 10 points, or those 3rd and longs that you earn. And I think the Raiders didn't even have a single 3rd and 7 or longer in the entire game, which is bonkers.
Well, there was one play I saw a video of where both Von Miller and Bradley Chubb both won their rep right off the bat. But the ball was out so fast they couldn't even get within 5 steps of the quarterback. And so it just kind of shows that they can win, and it still won't show up as them doing good. I mean, they're
doing
still
well, Carl. Come on.
Sorry, doing well. Sorry,
we may be losing, but we still have more class and education than the Raiders fans. We have to hang on to something. Doing well.
We've done good.
Yeah.
No. So, English aside, it is my first language. I will say that. I'm not very good at it, but it is my language. But no, I mean, like I said, it would have been
funnier if you said doing well at it. Sorry, continue.
Yes.
Just mixing it up. I'm sorry. this game has got me totally scatterbrained. I've been scatterbrained all day.
I understand. But no, I mean, they can still win and still not do anything. I mean, that's just part of the situation they were in. Again, with the Broncos pretty much saying, we dare you to pass the short passes on us. I mean, we're going to sit 10 yards back and not let you beat us over the top. I mean, they were playing defensively not to lose. And when you play that way, you see those prolonged drives like that. And part of that could be, like you said, they don't have the horses to really play more aggressive. But at the same time, when you're just watching this team go up 14-0, you got to start taking some chances. And the Broncos just didn't seem like they were a team willing to take some chances.
Yeah, you're right. It's not aggressive. It just felt very flat from the beginning. Very flat. So, but you know what? One game, week 1, a lot of teams look flat. There's so many new pieces in Denver, and it's a long season. They're 0-1 right now. This is probably a team that's not making the playoffs this season, but there's plenty to take away. And I know Denver has high expectations, but it's important not to guzzle the orange Kool-Aid too hard, right? You got to substitute it with some orange juice or something. Got to get some vitamin C in there. For me, it's just been water though on that weight loss grind. But anyway, that's something we'll definitely get into in here. But you have any thoughts as well? I mean, Broncos, they won the penalty battle. They had 18 less penalty yards than the Raiders. But really, this game, it really came down to one thing, and it's something we harped on last season with Case Keenum. But it was on both offense and defense, and that to me is the red zone, right? The Broncos. I mean, hats off to Brandon McManus. You're out there doing everything you freaking can. But when you're the Broncos and you get in the red zone and you kick 3 field goals, and the Raiders are 3 for 3 in their first 3 attempts in the red zone.
Yeah, I guess
you can't do it. You
right.
can't do it.
I will say it did feel different than last year, though. Like Case Keenum, they got down into the red zone, and it was, please just don't throw an interception. I didn't really worry about that with Flacco because he was making good decisions throughout the game.
Holding the ball a little long.
He did. I will say that. He did hold on to the ball sometimes too long. But I thought he was making pretty good decisions. I did like some of the play calls compared to last year. Yeah. And, I mean, really, Broncos should have been had another touchdown there in the red zone for sure. And like I said, if Phillip Lindsay bounces that outside and has that blocker in front of him instead of bouncing inside to the defender, I mean, we might be talking a whole different story here. And saying, wow, this red zone offense. I mean, so it's just a couple things that I'm not going to get too crazy about it right now. If we're 4 games in and it's still exactly the same, that we got the drops. But I mean, again, last year it was more play calling and just Case Keenum's inability to threaten the middle of the field. This year it seems very different. I mean, Flacco can threaten the middle of the field. So teams have to cover every inch of the red zone. And like I said, it's just, I want to see if this is a trend that continues where they're giving up or getting 3 instead of 7, or if this is going to be just an all around team issue, because I do think Flacco actually is a pretty good red zone quarterback.
Yeah. That's one thing. He wasn't just tossing it out of the back of the end zone. He was giving his guys a chance to go up and get it and make plays. So that's going to be a big thing. So we'll see. But really, I mean, that's what it came down to. And you're talking about the offense, but the defense in the red zone, you got to flex down there.
Yeah.
It was easy.
It was frustrating to watch how much the defensive line was getting pushed back. I mean, I think that was my main thing is there just was no penetration. There was no holding up. There was no letting those linebackers get in there to make plays. Really the defensive line was the most frustrating part for me on that defense. I know Yadam had his issues and things like that, but for them not to get any kind of push when especially the Raiders had 2 backup guards in. I really thought the Broncos would be able to make some noise there in the middle, and it just never happened.
I was just hoping for more. Raiders playing so many new guys in the offensive line. I mean, starting 2 backup guards, left tackle that was struggling last season, the Antonio Brown stuff, and you struggle against a rookie, granted a first-round pick rookie. I highlighted him for a reason. Darren Waller, who put up as many catches in this game as he had in his career before this, essentially. And Tyrell Williams, man, it's disheartening.
Right.
But, Broncos playing the last game of the Black Hole, that Raiders team was hyped. And maybe they're better than we're giving them credit. I mean, they have offensive firepower. I mean, second year under Gruden. Derek Carr was playing at MVP level 2 seasons ago, and they've continually added some talent to that defense. Young, but some talent. I mean, Vontaze Burfict, for as dirty as he was playing, he was making tackles. And, I mean, Jonathan Abram, whew, that dude can fly around. I definitely remember him standing out in the Iowa's bowl game where they beat Mississippi State. Sorry, I always got to throw that in there. And he's a great player. Colin Farrell was out there doing stuff. So, and the other edge of theirs, Marudo, I can't even remember his name off the top of my head. It's starting right now opposite of Farrell. Had 2 big plays to start off the game. So, yeah, it was disheartening. But, it's one game. It was on the road, and it was a pick'em game. And the Broncos had a chance to win it, and they didn't. The ball could have bounced another way. So that's where it is at. But if they play like this again, going into Green Bay, going into Arrowhead, playing even the Houston Texans or the Chargers even, they're going to get beat by double digits pretty easily. So you got this loss here, but you got to really straighten it up from this point forward.
His name was Mayowa?
Gesundheit.
So. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but Mayowa.
Well, I'll trust you on that one. I definitely remember reading it and was like, well, That's a guy that's probably not going to do anything, and then he proceeds to does things. So.
Right, he had 2 sacks in the games.
Yep, Elijah Wilkinson did not look great, and Juwan James might be done for the year. It's the curse of the right tackle. I'm going to blame Ryan Harris. He seems like a nice guy. It'd be fun to blame him. Maybe I'll pick on him in social media a little bit. So, all right, well, we should probably take a break. We will be right back.
If you found $100 on the street, would you pick it up or would you keep walking? Of course, you'd take the money, right? So, why do you keep picking winners and not betting on them? That's why I go to MyBookie. It's fast, it's easy, and they pay when you win. Let's face it, where you're betting is just as important as who you're betting on. Now, I wouldn't be telling you guys to bet with MyBookie if they weren't the best. Do the smart thing. If you're going to bet this football season, bet with MyBookie. But did you know that you can actually bet on games even after they kick off? If by the second half it looks like your bet's going south, you can always just take the other side, believe it or not. If you're the kind of guy that likes to bet a little and win a lot, try a parlay. If all your picks come through, you'll multiply your winnings, and no matter how you bet, the NFL season is the best time of the year. Join now, and MyBookie will double your first deposit. Use the promo code OVERTIME to activate the offer. That's promo code OVERTIME. Visit mybookie.ag today. You play, you win, you get paid.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell along with Carl Dumler. And guys, we got to exercise some demons. We got to have a little bit of positivity here. So one of my favorite segments that we do, I'm not really a stock market guy, but I do enjoy the stock of following players. Probably one reason I love following the NFL draft prospects during the seasons. But we're going to be talking the Denver Broncos here. Carl, 3 up, 2 down. We got to be a little bit positive with the negativity that we had in that first segment there. So who is your first guy that is stock up after this game for the Denver Broncos? Who's a guy that stood out to you that you're feeling better about coming out of this game?
Oh, this guy, I mean, he absolutely surprised me with the game that he just put up. He actually looked like a number 1 wide receiver that he claimed that he was trying to be this year. Courtland Sutton caught 7 of his 8 passes, looked good in and out of his breaks, was getting open, winning the one-on-one battles, making some tough catches in traffic, making some plays in the open field. I got to give it to the guy. He really did resemble a number 1 wide receiver. 120 yards. I mean, he didn't get in the end zone, but beyond that, I was really impressed with his game. And I mean, it just felt like the most quiet 120 yards ever. I mean, because of how bad the offense was struggling there for a long time, but he seemed to be the one player out there making lots of plays for him. And like I said, he just caught everything his direction. And when we're talking about last year where he had the drop issues and some concentration issues and route running issues, all those things, all those looked very much improved in this game. And if he can continue to do that, he really can develop into a number 1 wide receiver. He has the tools to do it. He's not the fastest guy, but he's big, he's strong, he has enough quickness to get open, and he does enough in the open field to get himself some extra yards. So again, with Sanders still coming back from his injury, I thought Courtland Sutton would struggle in this one with maybe having teams try to double him a little bit more. But nope, he went out there, made plays, was on time, in the right place. Just looked like a whole different receiver than last year.
I do want to ask you, being the wide receiver guy between the two of us, did you have any, I don't want to say concerns, but like watching him on a few of those routes, I think it was in the first half, the ball just did not look clean into his hands. Right, like he made the catches, but I feel like there was a little bit of double clutches, just not the soft mitts. Like when you see Larry Fitzgerald catch the ball, it does not move. I felt like there's a little bit of extra movement in there.
Oh, I mean, it's got to be a little bit of a concern, but I don't worry about that as much with him as I was worrying about like seeing him become a better route runner, because that was one of his main issues last year, and then just being consistently in the right place. Last year, there were a lot of plays where he looked lost. He didn't really look lost in this game. He looked like he was in the place he was supposed to be, and a lot of his throws were timing routes, and so that was bigger for me. I think as he gets more and more comfortable, I mean, I would say a lot of the receivers struggled a little bit with Flacco because he was zooming it in there.
His placement was a little bit off, too. That's probably my biggest complaint with him is that, and I need to see the all-22 for a different angle and, well, two different angles, see that everybody, if he's making the right reads and everything, but I felt like the placement was just, man, I wish it was a little better.
Right. But beyond that, I mean, I still think there is a little bit of that adjustment going on for these receivers. I mean, I know that they got a whole off season to work with them and stuff like that, but it's still, you're going from one of the weakest arms in football in Case Keenum to one of the strongest arms in Flacco. And that just takes a little bit of time to really adjust. I remember I had a friend in college. I mean, he had the biggest rocket arm ever. And we used to do drills where we just would throw it as hard as we could at each other. And he always won. I hated that he always won. I mean, I was a better receiver, but he could throw it so hard. I mean, my hands would just be almost bleeding by the end of it. And I feel like that's still kind of the same situation with Flacco. And so those double clutches don't bother me too much. We'll see how it continues as the season progresses. But the fact that, I mean, he really caught some very difficult passes where he was in double coverage and was able to come up with it, got hit a couple times, still came up with it, even got hurt at one point and still stayed in the game.
Yeah, he was getting popped.
Yeah, and still went out there and made some nice catches for him after getting popped. I just really commend this guy for the kind of game that he had when nobody else seemed to have much energy.
Well, speaking of energy, my stock up has got to be pretty much the only guy who showed up on the offensive line for the most part. Dalton Reisner, left guard, and, I'm pretty, even though the Broncos lost, the fact that we're talking about 2 second-round picks as guys who are stock up coming out of this game, I'll take that as a moral victory. It's a little one, but considering the second-round history of the Broncos, if Sutton and Reisner can be two guys for you for the next 3 seasons, that's huge. So Reisner, I thought he looked pretty good in the run game. He's playing tenacious. First real start, regular season game, whatever, at left guard. And the run and the pass game, didn't look too much for him. I don't ever think, again, he's going to be elite, but he is a solid player on the offensive line, and that's one of the 3 to 4 that you need out there to really have a competent line. So check that box. I feel good about Reisner going forward. He's going to be good. Is he going to be great? I don't know, but he's going to be good. He's definitely going to be good enough. And it just feels good to have one of those positions on the offensive line, covered for the next few seasons. Maybe we'll see him switch to right guard or center at some point too, with Leary and McGovern probably gone after the season, or potentially gone after the season. So we'll see. But Reisner, he belongs. Wasn't too big for him. He's going to have a heck of a test next week. We'll definitely get into that in the next episode. But he looks like he's a hit, and beggars can't be choosers right now for the Broncos. So I'll take it. I'm pretty excited that he is your boy. Your Manhattan, Kansas boy, or whatever. I guess he's technically a Colorado son, but for college, your Manhattan, Kansas boy, Dalton Reisner.
That's right.
Looking pretty good and definitely on the way up.
Yeah, I liked his game, and when they seemed to run behind him, they had success. It seemed like when they really tried to get around that right side is when a lot of the negative plays in the run game happened. Now, they had a couple nice ones break, but for the most part, it seemed like there was some negative ones. And so, yeah, I'm impressed with him. Hope he continues to grow as a player. Nice to see that our first 2 players listed, one's a rookie, one's a second-year player. So at least some of the players that are stepping up are the young guys. That's definitely nice to be able to say. But unfortunately, my first stock down is a young player as well. Another wide receiver, Deshaun Hamilton. He wasn't targeted a whole lot in this game. But unfortunately, that drop touchdown is so big. It seemed like the offense was finally starting to get some footing in the game, starting to be able to chip at that lead. And if they score a touchdown there, I think it really puts the fear in the Raiders, going, oh no, what's going on? But when they are able to stop that and all of a sudden, it's just a field goal, okay, no big deal. We still got the lead, still got a 2-score lead, no big deal. And it changed everything for me in that game. Yeah. I felt like the air just went out of the team. The defense, the next drive didn't look all that great. The offense, the next drive, that was, I think, when they had to punt again?
I believe so, yes.
And so it did. It really kind of destroyed some of that momentum of the game for him that they were finally starting to build. And you just can't have that. I mean, you got to know that you're that guy that's going to be running over the middle. You're going to take some hits. And he's always been known as a pretty consistent player. But you were talking about the double clutch with Sutton?
Yeah.
Hamilton, what are you doing? You're letting that bounce off your chest? And I mean, I guess you could say it's a little bit of, again, just the Flacco zooming it in there, but you got to be ready for it.
I mean, it was a small window. He had to zoom it in there. That's the only option.
Right, exactly. And he did all the things you don't want to see a receiver do when trying to make those kind of catches. And so just very, very disappointing to see his game. I thought he would be a player that really break out this year because Flacco actually likes to throw over the middle. And I thought Hamilton could be one of his favorite targets, especially on those third and short kind of plays. And I'm not saying that he can't turn it around, obviously. I mean, it's just one game, one drop, nothing crazy, but it's still...
It's a stock report for a reason.
Right.
There's ebb and flow.
And so it was very frustrating to see a guy that I thought could emerge not step up in a big moment.
Yeah, and the drop on, what was it? The red zone pass was bad, but so was probably that third down. I mean, I think the announcer said bad placement by Flacco, but like, how long did it take for him to like get his footing, right? You know what I'm talking about? The little flat?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I felt like he was on ice. Like it was like a Three Stooges thing. He's like, whoa, 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 like SpongeBob throwing burgers in the air, or Patrick or whatever. Just like cartoonish. Right. It's like, God, get the ball and turn upfield.
Right.
It's right there.
Should have been
it's right
easy.
There. Yeah.
Did you ever have that problem on Madden where you'd try to turn upfield and the guy would just keep going straight to the sideline? Oh, yeah.
Or like you'd barely, get bumped by somebody and then you're like trying to catch your balance for like 10 seconds. And by that time, the whole team and the opposing refs tackle you.
That's what I felt like I was watching. I'm going, oh my gosh, is there a Madden glitch right now? It was. He just didn't do anything positive for the team. He did a lot of negative against the team. Just two big plays that they needed, and it just didn't work out in their favor. So, I mean, he's got 15 more games to really redeem himself, but not a good showing here week one.
And I just wonder if he's dynamic enough. He'd be fine wide receiver 4, but if he's your wide receiver 3, that's a pretty big part of your offense in today's NFL. Can he do enough down the field? Can he do enough after the catch? Unless you're just an incredible route runner with incredible hands, Julian Edelman style, playing in an offense that really just gets you in your niche, you got to bring a little bit more than what he's shown so far to be a wide receiver 3 in a good passing offense. So we'll see. So my stock down. It's unfortunate, but it's got to be Juwan James. Thank God when they paid him, it's a 2-year deal with 2 option years at the end. He made it 10 snaps, and his knee looked like it buckled, and doesn't sound good. Probably by the time you guys are listening to this, we will have a more definitive answer. Everybody's waiting on the MRI, but the word I've been given from those connected better to the situation, or those even more in the know than that, Juwan James might not be playing this season. This season might have lasted a whole 10 snaps. So hopefully when you guys are listening to this, it'll turn out that it's just a mild sprain. Going to miss, 4 to 6 weeks. But man, the injury history, not good. And that makes, it goes beyond this. But 3 big guys I can think of recently the Broncos took a shot on with the injury history and free agency. Ronald Leary, that's been, when he's on, he's a solid player, although he's stunk on this game. But he's been a bust for what he's been paid. Bryce Callahan, man, I don't know, man. That foot, he might be ready in a month. He might not be ready. Who knows? There's some concerns there. And now Juwan James. So it's bad. And when Garrett Bowles is struggling like he was, and Elijah Wilkinson struggled like he did, you really needed James out there to provide it. Even if he's just slightly above average, if he can be stable slightly above average, God, inject it into my veins. But 10 snaps, and maybe it's bad luck, whatever. But it's just like, come on, Jesus Christ. Like, what are we doing? So, stock down. I don't want to be too cliche, but one of the best scouting, coaching sayings, slogans, your best ability is your availability, and he's not shown that. And 10 snaps, I mean, God damn it. So I'll kick it back off to you, Carl.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to positive here. And a guy that some were ragging on a little bit earlier in the preseason, Royce Freeman. I mean, we talked about it on this show that we thought there was a good chance Royce Freeman could get half the carries from the running back position. And we thought he might have a little bit more of a breakout year for the Broncos. And as a running back, I thought he looked like the better of the two between him and Phillip Lindsay. I mean, there wasn't much there in the first half, obviously. And by the time they got to the second half, they couldn't always establish the run like they wanted to. But, I mean, he averaged 5.6 yards per carry and had his really nice long run where he broke through a couple tackles, made a nice cut. I mean, just there was a lot of things that I really liked. And then there was a couple other plays that really stuck out to me where it looked like he just kind of paused in the backfield and a lot of people, I mean, they'll get after a running back for doing that, but he was waiting for his blockers to come around and get into their position. And then as soon as they did, boom, he hit the hole and was right there making some pretty good yardage. And so I thought he did a very, very consistent job of showing patience, but also showing when he needs to explode through the hole and make his one cut and go. And so I was very impressed with Royce Freeman and showed a little bit. I mean, he only had the one catch. As a receiver, I hope that they can get him a little bit more involved in some of that. And I mean, I think his one catch wasn't it on that trick play or trick formation?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that they can find other ways to get him a little bit more involved in the passing game. I know they tried to get Phillip Lindsay more in the passing game, giving him 6 targets, but no, I really did. I thought Royce Freeman, of the two, I thought he had the better game.
Yeah, it was. He played well. I wish he'd have shown up better in the first half. But, 10 carries, 55 yards, 56 yards, that's fine. When you're doing that timeshare, that's fine. And he had that really explosive run as well, showing that power. So that's no question, no complaints there. Stock up for me, another young player. We're hitting on this 2018 class pretty hard, but I thought Josey Jewell had a solid game. I don't think Josey Jewell's ever going to be anything more than a slightly above average player at linebacker. He just has far too many limitations in my mind as, a scout of his game, the athleticism, the speed, but I thought he played pretty well. I mean, he led the team in tackles. He had pretty decent game in coverage, and he, in the run game, honestly, which was his strength coming in, I thought he bit a few times and had some issues there. As far as, just processing it right, getting to the right spot. But, 14 tackles, 7 solo tackles, that's a solid game. And, the Broncos, they need him to be better closer to the line of scrimmage. And I'm not sure if that's coming. They definitely need Todd Davis back to complement him to help that run game get some more of those stuffs. But I thought, overall, considering where I was with Josey Jewell coming into this game, he looked competent. He was far from the problem in this game. And that, for me, is enough to warrant a shout-out and a stock up.
Sounds good. All right, well, I'm going to go stock down here. And I'm going to go coaches. There were 2 things that stuck out to me in this one that just were very frustrating with the coaches. One, the early adjustments that they kept talking, if you wait till halftime, it's too late. Well, they waited till halftime. And so it's kind of going, the thing you said you weren't going to do, you did. And you could tell that the Yadam was struggling. And I know you said there wasn't the players behind him to really substitute in for him. But I thought there were some adjustments they could have made to help him out. At least not have him play 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. That was just too easy for them to just wing it out there real quick and let him be one-on-one there with Yadam. And he made some nice tackles. But I just thought you could have a little bit more help over the top, let him be aggressive on the underneath, and let him at least have a chance there. I just didn't think he had many chances. And then beyond that, again, some of the rushing attack, I thought they could have done some run blitzes to try to help get a couple negative plays. They never really did anything. They just kept staying in that base package. And let's bring 4 and have everybody else kind of drop back. It just, there wasn't anything that stuck out with me on some of the things that I was hoping to see. And then beyond that, then the clock management at the end of the first half. They let about 10 seconds run off before they called a timeout. And you think about that extra 10 seconds that could have helped maybe get them a little bit closer to field goal, to allow a few more different plays that they could have ran. They were kind of forced on some of the things that they had to do. I thought they could have really handled the end of the first half much better. When you're down like you were, and it just, again, they looked like they were playing not to lose. Like, we don't want to have a bad turnover. I get that. But you're down 14-0. You got to take a couple shots. And they did that in the second half. I mean, they took their chances. I mean, Sanders got his big plays. Of course, Courtland Sutton had a couple big catches for him. I mean, so they had a couple big plays, but why didn't we see that at the end of the first half? I'm sorry. If they intercept it, well, who cares? You're down 14-0 anyway. It's already looking like it's going to be a game that you lost. So some of the adjustments that they ended up doing, I just wanted to see much earlier in the game.
I do not disagree with you there. And stock down for me now. Yeah, I've been really offensive line heavy in this one, but Ronald Leary, not a great game. He's rusty. He's a guy he's a vet. So you hope that it's not going to be an issue for him, missing all that time. But, man, the penalties, getting beaten at the point of attack, letting pressures up, leakage in the middle, so to speak. Not a great game from the vet, Ronald Leary. Hopefully it'll be better next week. I mean, playing with another new right tackle, probably with James out for the foreseeable future, and McGovern at center now. You just expect better from a player of Leary's pay degree, but also caliber. I mean, when he's on, he's a above average guard, and really just looked out of place out there. Was probably the worst player on the offensive line for the Broncos. I mean, Wilkinson struggled a decent amount, and Bowles, despite not giving up a true hold, although he did have a hold out there that was called on the wrong player. Also a few plays where Flacco really did bail him out. Leary was the guy that left me wanting. I had hoped for just more solid. Doesn't have to be great, just be solid, and he struggled. So definitely stock down on Ronald Leary.
All right, well, let's get to our final positive players here. And my first one is Kareem Jackson, one of the defensive players that they added. And I thought he was one of the few that really seemed to have a lot of energy on the field. That's one plus. And two, he's out there actually making plays. He had a couple nice, really pass breakups. He was showing up in the run game. I really liked what I saw from him. And I feel like the Broncos could do a few more things with him that they didn't even show in this game. And I'm hoping the coaches saw that and go, okay, now let's go do this, and this with this guy. Especially with Callahan, we don't know when he's going to be back. The secondary, I thought, should be a huge boom for this defense. Other than Kareem Jackson, there was a lot of struggles. I mean, Justin Simmons was late on a couple plays. Oh, I'm on stock up. Sorry. I'll stick with Kareem Jackson. But no, I mean, I did. I was very impressed with his game, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the Broncos can do with him, especially as that kind of jack of all trades player there in the secondary.
Yep. I thought he had a really good game, and he's the one free agent signing that looked definitely worth the money. So good for him. That one series where he had those two pass deflections, that was big. That was big time. Broncos needed it, and he stepped up. So hopefully he'll do that again next week. Maybe take the ball away as well. But those two pass deflections on that series, that was all Kareem Jackson. So good for him. And stock up for me. I really had to scrape the bottom of the barrel here for this one, unfortunately. So I'm going to go with Brandon McManus, a guy that's had his ups and downs, but if it's in 50 yards, the dude's not missing. And solid game. I mean, obviously you wish he was kicking extra points instead of touchdowns, but when he was called upon, he did exactly what he needed to do. So good for him. Good game from him. And hopefully we'll get those 3s into 1s going forward. But, he did what was asked for him, and considering the issues elsewhere on special teams, although Wadman, I thought he had one really good punt, but had a solid game as well. But McManus, he stock up. He had a pretty good game.
Yeah, I mean, even that 64-yard field goal, he was so close.
I thought it was in.
I did
thought
too.
it was in.
I did too. I kept waiting for him to show the replay. It took a long time before they showed it because I'm going, how short was it? Because it had to be real close. And Denver, that's good. I mean, I think he probably could have had about 2 or 3 extra yards in Denver. And I mean, he's kicking off that dirt, so I wonder if that played a little bit into it coming up short. But I mean, he looks like a guy that's really back on track. That was something that I saw in preseason when they had him kick some of those 50-yarders where he missed so many there at the end of the season. And part of it, he wasn't getting close when the season was ending. And this time, I mean, everything was right down the middle. And so just really, really happy to see that for him. And the power of the mustache, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It helps.
Don't tell the fiance that. I don't think she'd appreciate knowing that. She's like, who would wear a mustache? And I'm like, I don't know, man. There's some pretty powerful mustaches out there.
That's right.
So, and just to kind of highlight this, because this is a sports podcast. This isn't a statistical podcast or a science podcast. So we can be here for some confirmation bias. Sometimes we do disparage Pro Football Focus because their grades are, how do we say, invariant. You know, they're not the most standardized. But this is a tweet they just released about an hour ago. Broncos lost last night against the Raiders, but some young players played very well. Dalton Reisner finished Monday with an 84.2 grade, and Cortland Sutton finished the game with his highest graded game ever, 86.3. So there you go, Carl. You know, not all is lost. And if the Broncos season does get off the tracks here, some things we can look forward to is these young guys hopefully continuing that and building some momentum going forward. So stick with us, guys, you know, through the rest of this podcast, of course, but throughout the season, you know, win-loss, we're going to be continuing to come here for you guys. But stay tuned. We got to take a quick break. We will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell, along with Carl Dumler, following a really just not a great game against the Oakland Raiders. Obviously, you hate to lose to a team like that. And Carl, we said last week that this game, given the schedule, given the issues with the Broncos on the roster, and you know, not many teams looking at the schedule that you feel good about a win. Broncos needed to win this game to make the playoffs. I mean, we both agreed with that last week, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to see with the schedule how they can do that. I mean, you said it earlier in the podcast that there will be things that will break certain ways, and some teams that look like they should have been superstars that end up not being. I mean, I always go back to the Eagles when they had their dream team and they went 4-12. And I mean, so sometimes that ends up happening, but I think there are teams that you sit there and say, okay, you know these are going to be good teams. We know the Patriots are going to be a good team. The Chiefs, I can feel very confident, unless Mahomes goes down with a very, very serious injury, that they're going to be a really good team. And I feel like schedule-wise, we have a pretty decent idea of how this is going to go and how things are going to break. And so it was a very important game for the Broncos. And unfortunately, they didn't show up like they should have. And so it's a much tougher road. If they make the playoffs, I'm willing to eat crow and be happy about it. But it's just really hard to see the path to that kind of ending for the Broncos.
Yep. Yeah, it's could be a long season. You know, we've said that from the beginning. Obviously, hope springs eternal when the season starts. But you know what? There are 31 other teams and fan bases that, well, maybe I guess we should say 30 because it was pretty obvious from the beginning. The Dolphins weren't really in on this season, but every other team, they're thinking they're going to compete this year. You know, like that's the name of the game. And only one team can hoist the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the year. So you gotta set these expectations. And again, 1 week, you know, you still should be thinking playoffs, wild card, you know, AFC West. You know, who knows? I mean, the Broncos are already a freaking game back of everybody in the AFC West because, of course, the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Raiders won. So that's not good. But you know, you got to have a nuanced enough viewpoint on this team and of the season where it's not just the wins and losses that you are evaluating to make it a successful season. There are so many things that can be taken away from even just this game. Flacco, an improvement at quarterback. The passing game actually had competent moments. Dalton Reisner, Cortland Sutton. We just did the stock up and stock down with a bunch of these guys, the young guys, playing well. And it's going to take some time. New schemes on both sides of the ball. A lot of injuries already starting to pile up. Tim Patrick, 4 to 6 weeks, might be done for the year. Gosh, are they going to bring him back? I don't know. We'll get to see Juwan Winfrey now, I guess. And maybe Juwan James done for the year. I guess we'll get to see Elijah Wilkinson. So it's got to go beyond the win-loss record and got to think about it as a season where you're really finding your guys. Who's sticking around, who's going to be here for this 2020-2021 season, who are the dudes. So we'll see. Next week is a must-win against the Chicago Bears. The Broncos have a ridiculous record at home in the first 2 weeks of the season. But, thanks NFL, the Bears have had the most time to prepare for any team in the league, with them preparing for the Broncos because they played that Thursday night game. And hey, guess what? The Broncos have the least amount of time of any team in the league preparing for the Bears because they played the last game of week 1. So I don't know. What do you think about that? Where does the advantage lie in that regard? Because the Bears, they're going to not have so many dings and bruises. The Broncos game was very physical, but the Broncos do have that major mile high advantage.
Well, you got to think the Broncos probably don't need as much time to prepare, considering Vic Fangio and his entire staff on defense pretty much were with the Bears last year. So, they have an advantage there of knowing what to expect from the offense, what kind of plays are going to work against them, those kind of things. And Scangarello, that's probably where you're going to run into a little bit more problem and just getting your offense ready for that game and what kind of scheme you're going to run, what kind of plays you're going to run. But like you said, when you're talking about Mile High in September, that is a pretty big advantage. And I do think that this is a team that's going to feel like they just got pretty embarrassed. And, I guess you could say the same about the Bears. That offense only scoring 3 points and coming out of there with a loss. I don't know. I think it's a pretty even game when you're looking at the different advantages and disadvantages for each team. I will say, for the Broncos, maybe because the loss is going to be so fresh on their mind, maybe they're going to come out with a little bit more energy, where the Bears, 10 days gives you a little bit of time to calm down. You and I have already talked about, even on this podcast, of we know it's just a game, but it's still frustrating what we saw. I was getting angry watching that game going, what the heck are we doing? And I'm sure the players feel it all the more, because this is their livelihood. And so, again, I think the Broncos will have a little bit more energy, feed off the home crowd. Hopefully they show up big time for them. And I don't know. It should be because both teams don't have great offenses, I think it's going to be that one low-scoring game that either team could come out with a win.
Might come down to who has the ball last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Turnovers are going to be big.
Oh, man. Yes. It's crazy the Broncos had no turnover. It was a turnover-free game. We'll see. All right, well, any parting thoughts before we get out of here?
Oh, I would just say, and this is more saying it to myself, stay calm. It is 1 week. It is week 1 where there were a lot of crazy things. Who would have thought the Titans go out there and whoop up on the Browns I think it was in Cleveland, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, who would have thought that was going to happen? I still think the Browns are probably going to be a pretty darn good team. But, just let's let this play out before we get too crazy. And like you said, there's still a lot of things that you can read into this season, even if it's not successful in the wins and loss columns. There's just so much more that we can do. That's why we love this kind of doing this kind of podcast, because it is so much more beyond just the wins and losses. This is about team building and trying to figure out what's the best way to go about being consistently successful moving forward. And this was always going to be a process for this team.
Trust the process? We're not there yet. We're not there yet. Week 1, it's too early for that. So, alrighty, folks. Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.